Okay, so welcome everyone. Today we're looking at the quality of literature. So how do you determine whether you have quality literature? And then your referencing and plagiarism. Okay, so as Jen said, this is our second webinar, and if you would like the first one, you can contact the student division and we can send that to you. Okay, so how do we evaluate research articles? In today's modern digital age, we have so much access to so much information, but not all of it is quality information. And that's what we're looking at today. How are you going to decide whether articles are relevant to you and what you're doing? And also are they quality articles? Are they written by, are they published in good, reputable journals? Are they worth using? So to first decide when you're starting your literature review, just decide when you're scanning articles whether they'll be relevant to you or not. The first thing you'll look at is the title. Unfortunately, there are many authors out there who like to use creative titles, and this can be very difficult because if you're looking for specific variables and you're searching search engines that use key terms, you might either not pick up their information or pick it up and then it's irrelevant to what you're actually looking for. So the first thing we do is we look at the title and to see whether the title is what we are looking for. Then we'll read the abstract. So the abstract gives you a little bit of a summary of everything that has been done in the study. So this abstract will give you enough information to decide whether it's worth reading the rest of the article. So if you have read the abstract and you feel that is that it sounds like a good idea and you would like to continue reading, then you go and read the article. So you wouldn't waste your time reading a whole article and then getting to the end and then being, well, I'm not sure. So even when you start reading the article, read the introduction and the conclusion first. And then if you think that this is relevant information, then you read the whole thing. So we don't waste our time reading a ton of information that is not relevant to us in the end. Okay. Let me just remove. Guys, please don't add any drawings. When you add drawings, it shows up on everybody's screens. Okay, so a way to evaluate the quality of literature is to use the CRAP test with 2 A's, right? Okay, so it's to check whether it is current, relevant, about the authority of the author, the accuracy of the information, and the purpose of the information. So after you've gone through all of these steps, you should have a good idea of how to decide whether something is good quality information. Okay, so the first set of questions that you can ask yourselves is based on currency, the timeliness of the information. So when was the information last published or posted or even updated? A lot of websites will give you a date of the last time the information was updated. And we want this to be rather current, unless it's things that don't change often, right? So if you're reading about certain laws or things like that, then it probably won't be updated every year. There's no point in doing that. So you have to use some of your own logic and your own sense in this as well. So we want information that is around 5 years old or younger. Sometimes this is not actually possible. Sometimes research hasn't been done in a certain topic for quite some time, and you have to refer back to older information. That's not a bad thing. That just means that when you write up your literature review and you identify the gaps in the topic area, one of the gaps will be that you don't have relevant literature, and this is a concern. If you're using information, well, it also depends on your topic. So if your topic requires current information, how are people feeling now? How are people coping right now? That's very different than if you want to compare what is happening, say, in opinions and attitudes regarding gender differences now and 20 years ago. Obviously, you're going to have to do some research now, but you're also going to have to go and look at what was being written 20 years ago so that you can compare. So the actual date of the research that you use will depend on what you are doing. Then the next thing is that if you're using internet sources, if you go back, are the links still functional when you click on them? If something has been moved or changed, then that is a reason to be concerned about the literature that you're using. So if you can't go back and find that same information again, you should be very concerned about why has it changed or disappeared. The next one is relevance. So this will be relevance to your topic, relevant to your needs. So does it relate to your topic or answer the question that you intend to ask? Who is the intended audience of the work? So if it's relevant, it should be that the audience of most of your sources are academic, people interested in reading academic journals, people in the academic environment. It's not to say that you can't use sources that come from other areas of life. So you can still use news articles, and you can use news information, and you can use something out of a magazine, but the majority of your information should come from academic work. Is the information written at an appropriate level? So is it not too elementary or too advanced? So if you think about who would you be writing for? If you're writing to children, it would be very different than if you're writing for a professor. And if you're writing to someone in the general public, if you want to give information to the general public, that would look very different to what you would maybe send out to psychological practitioners. What they need to know is very different. So you have to make sure that the information you have is appropriate for what you are doing. And then have you also looked at a variety of sources before you decided which ones you're going to use? So students tend to be quite lazy and think that the first page of Google Scholar is the only information that exists in the world. That is not true. You can actually go to the next page. It's very possible to just click and then see more. Go past the first page that comes out on each database. Read further than the first thing. And if your assignment says, oh, I need 10 references, it doesn't mean that you should pick the first 10 references that come up. The first 10 articles that come up in your search, okay, these are the ones. You have to read a little bit further, gather a little bit more information, and then decide what would be best, so that you're not put in a place where you have to add information into your work that you're not sure of. And then, would you be comfortable citing this? Would you be able to say, yes, I think this is good quality? If you yourself are worried about the quality of something, then you shouldn't be willing to publish it. You shouldn't be willing to tell the world this is good information, because that's what you do when you submit information. Okay, then the first A is the authority, so the source of the information. So if you look at the author, the publisher, the source, and the sponsor, who are these people? Can you look them up? Can you find them? Many articles, actually most articles, will give you some of the author's credentials and the organizations that they work for. So if you see a strange university name or some weird institution on the article, maybe look it up. And yes, there are many universities out there. So look it up and then just see whether it looks legit to you. That's one of the first things that you can do, is does this look legit? And then, is the author qualified to write on the topic? So if you'll find some authors have written huge amounts of work within a certain field. And then yes, by all means, you know that they are probably experts in that field. But there are also authors that have not written that much. This doesn't make them less qualified. When I say, is the author qualified? If you look at the author's credentials, does it say this is the professor of architecture at some obscure university writing about psychology in South Africa? I mean, that doesn't make sense. So use logic. Then, is there contact information? So usually you'll also be provided with contact information for the corresponding author. So if there's contact information already, that's a little bit of a good thing. You can contact them if you have any concerns about what they've written, or you can just say that, okay, no, because there's contact information, and I know that this is a real, this is a good journal, it's one with a good reputation that we use all the time, and there's contact information, and the author is really good, I'm going to go with this is good quality. And then the other thing is the URL that you see. So the source, and we'll look at this again just now, where the sources are coming from. So that little last bit of the email, of the URL, of the internet address, right? That can actually give you a lot of information. So if it's .com, if it's .edu, .gov, .org, .net, we'll look at just now at what the differences are between those things. The next one is the accuracy. So the reliability, the truthfulness, and the correctness of the content. And this is where having some sort of a background in research will really help you. Having some sort of understanding of how samples work and how methodologies work will help you judge better. But if you don't, you can still ask yourself information in terms of logic. So where does the information come from? So where did they go and get this information? Is the information supported by evidence? Have they provided enough evidence to reach the conclusions that they have? You can think for yourself. If you're reading this and you get to the conclusions and you don't understand how the two things came together, then maybe you shouldn't be using that as a source. And then, has the information been reviewed or refereed? So a lot of academic journals use a peer review system, which is actually quite harsh and quite stringent. So then you can be sure. So you can look up the journal and see whether they do use that type of peer review. And then if they do, then you know that this has at least been seen by other people in the field. And then can you verify any of the information with another source? So do you only find one article saying this thing? Or can you find multiple people who have written on the same topic and have come to similar conclusions? So the more there is about something, the better. But it's not always the case in psychology that there's a lot of literature. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't done enough research on yet. And it's very easy to come across one of these topics. So you're going to have to think about, is this something that a lot of research has been done on, and then I'm going with this one author who found something completely different to the other authors? Or is it really a new topic? So you have to use your own judgment in these things as well. And then also, does the language or tone seem unbiased and free of emotion? So if you're reading something and it feels like you're trying to be convinced of something, then you're in trouble. They shouldn't be trying to convince you. Academic writing should be unbiased. It should have structure to it, in that it starts with an introduction. It tells you what information we are looking for. So the research questions, how we have addressed this, how we have gone about finding this information. And then the conclusions logically have to flow from this information as well. There can't be anything else in it, and it can't be trying to convince us of anything. And then the last thing is the spelling, the grammar, and the other typographical errors, right? So if you're reading research, and often if it's been translated, you get the issue of a lot of spelling and other errors. It's safer to rather go and look for things that have been peer reviewed, where they have an editing team who have also looked at the work. Obviously, don't throw something away because there's one spelling mistake in it, because spelling mistakes can happen. A single grammar mistake can happen, even if it's been edited. Okay, and then the purpose, the reason why this information exists. So was it to inform people, which is what academic work should be about? Academic work is about informing people. Is it to teach people? This is also good information. Is it to sell you something? Then if they're trying to sell you something, avoid. Is it to entertain you in some way? So that's that ridiculous clickbait things that are on Facebook. Oh, you'll never believe what happened next. That is entertainment. That is not actual information. And then is it to persuade you of something? Again, if they're trying to persuade you of something, you have to be very careful, because then you must know that the rest of the information will be arguing for a certain point of view. So even you can use this information as long as you are very aware of what is presented as fact, might just be opinion. And then do the authors or sponsors make their intentions or purposes clear? So here you have the question at the end of a research paper. You'll often find conflicts of interest. People will declare conflicts of interest. So you don't want there to be any conflicts of interest. You also don't want to have it say that this is a this research paper is testing this new magic medication for some psychological disorder, and the company who produces this medication is also the company that has sponsored this research. This is when you should be getting suspicious, right? Because if they're paying to have a certain outcome, you should worry about that. And it's not to say that all of those things would be bad information, but you should be very careful about reading things like that. And then is the information fact, opinion, or propaganda? Opinion is not wrong. It just has to be supported by fact. So you can read opinion in academic work, but remember that there should be supporting information to that opinion. And then no propaganda. We try and avoid all propaganda. The media has enough propaganda. And then does the point of view appear objective and impartial? We really want the author to say that regardless of how it ended up, it could have gone this way. Maybe future research should look at it from another direction. So it's telling you that it's very objective. It's saying these were the problems that we had, and this is how you could address them. And then if there are any political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases in this, again, if you're going to use the information, because it's not a no throw it away type of situation, it's a carefully interpret and carefully think about what I say about this information. Okay, so reliable sources are the ones that, so reliable internet sources are the ones that come from educational, non-profit or government organizations. So it might say .edu.gov.us, it might say .ac.za is what our academic institutions use. Then it might also have the countries like .us, it might say .ca for Canada. So when you're getting information from government sources, they're supposed to be very accurate sources of information. Then you can also get reliable information from expert authors. So this is when you know someone is an expert on the topic and now they've written a piece that is maybe not academically published, but you can still pretty much go with what they've given you there because you know they've written multiple articles on this, or you know that they're an expert in it, you know that they work in the field that they are writing about. If it's from a reliable print source, so if you're looking up the New York Times online, yes, you can still use that information. That is a reliable source. That information is fact-checked, right? If you're reading someone's personal blog and they're telling you how to change the world, it's probably not a good idea to cite any of that. And then if the information is supported with evidence, even if it's not academically published, but there is good evidence and it is presented in a balanced and unbiased way, then that is also good. And that it is currently or recently updated. It should be rather new information or just updated often, if it's something that changes often. So the questionable sites, the one that you should stay away from, are the ones that have commercial organizations. So those that say .com, this includes Facebook. Facebook is not a good place to find your information. That is not a good thing. If it says .com, they're trying to sell you something. And if you think that Facebook hasn't been trying to sell you something, then you clearly have not noticed the flood of advertisements that you have been reading. Okay, if you have an anonymous author or authors without identifiable credentials, this is also dodgy information. You should be very careful about using this information. If you think about news, there are so many news sites out there. Why are they not willing to give the author's name? Because journalists and journalistic integrity should mean that I stand by what I say. So if you can't find the person's name who wrote it, then I want to know, why is that the case? The other thing is to be very careful if you're using secondhand experts and quotations, right? So if you're using information secondhand, so if you're saying, I found this in another source, be very careful. It's always better to go back to the original source because you don't know whether this person had misinterpreted or misrepresented this, whether it was on purpose or by accident. These things happen. So always try and find the original source that information came from. And then anything that is, any arguments that are unsupported, like we need facts and we need evidence. And then if it's biased, so when they're trying to tell you it's one way or the other way. And then old information. This again depends, old is a relative term. It depends on what you're researching. It depends on your topic. What is old? Okay, so here are some examples of non-academic information. So a man tries to hug a wild lion and you won't believe what happens next. Cows lose their jobs as milk prices drop. And people seem to find a lot of information on Facebook. You should try and avoid these and rather go for the ones that look more boring and don't have catchy headlines. The boring ones are the better ones when it comes to academic work, unfortunately. Maybe we should start using more creative titles and adding strange pictures. Okay, so we're going to get to plagiarism soon. So anyone who accuses me of stealing their jokes can kiss my black ass. Clearly, that is plagiarized. Another famous example is Melania stealing Michelle Obama's speech. So Donald, I'm sorry, I copied speech from Michelle Obama. And then he says, that's okay, honey, I copied my speech from a Nazi website. And this was when he was just elected as president. Okay, so why is it important to reference information? So it allows us to trace the origin of ideas. It allows us to go back to where we wanted to be. So we want to see, sometimes we want to trace back where an idea comes from, and we can trace it all the way back to where it started by the first author. And that is a good thing. It's good to be able to trace information back. If you came up with a groundbreaking, world-changing idea, and even if it was just a small idea, which then other authors built on, you would still want them to acknowledge that it was your original idea. It also allows us to build a web of ideas. So this is great because it allows us to show how our work is related to other work and how it can be integrated to other work. So it shows how our work becomes a part of the greater body of knowledge. Then it allows you to find your own voice, and sometimes this is difficult for students when you're trying to find your own academic voice, but you're told not to say something that you can't support, and it becomes very conflicting. The more you read, the more you'll see where the author's own voices are coming through. And when you're referencing their voices, you'll eventually start to find your voice. It gives validity to any of the arguments that you make. This is just, it shows that you have backing, that you are not making this up as you go along. Then spreading knowledge. So it allows us to spread knowledge much further because I can go from your information, I can go look up the sources you used, and I could look up the sources they use, and I can go all the way and I can find a lot of information. So it's spreading information. It shows an appreciation to the original authors. It can also influence other writers. So your work can also show that you've used these sources, and another student might feel that, oh, well, that was a great idea. I'm also going to go look up those sources, and then it leads to other ideas. So it can influence new information. It's often part of your marking criteria. If you're a student, marking criteria are still pretty much important. And then avoiding plagiarism is probably the biggest reason why we would reference information. Okay, so plagiarism in general is one of a number of practices deemed by universities to constitute cheating or as a lack of academic integrity. So these will include, a lack of academic integrity would include collusion. So this is when two students work together or a group of students work together when it's not a group project. Falsification, so whether you have falsely presented information or actually invented information. Students also, for some reason, think it's okay to invent sources. So I don't have the energy to go and look up where I came up with this idea. So I'm just going to make up a resource and my lecturer will never know anything happened. That is also wrong. Then this is replication. So this is where you self-plagiarize, where you take one assignment and you submit the same assignment for multiple subjects or modules or whatever you have. Then taking unauthorized notes into an examination, well, that's clearly cheating. Obtaining an unauthorized copy of an exam paper. communication between students during an exam, and also the impersonation of another person in an exam. So if someone else gives you their student card and they're like, please go and write this exam for me because you know so much about this and I do not, that would also be cheating. So there are different forms of plagiarism. So the first is copying another person's work, and this is the one that you are very familiar with. You shouldn't copy people's work. Then presenting arguments that use a blend of your own, but also a significant percentage of somebody else's work. So this is where it comes down to paraphrasing is not copying and pasting the sentence over, then using words synonym function to change 2 words in the sentence. That is not paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is rewriting the work, summarizing the work. And then even if you do paraphrase, it can still be plagiarism if you don't give the due acknowledgement. Okay, so the levels of plagiarism, cheating, just plain out cheating, or not attributing your work to the people who have, so not giving attribution to the people who have done the work, so not recognizing their input. And then patchwork writing. So this is where students think they can get away with plagiarism if they take a little bit of information from a bunch of different sources. The thing is that because people have their unique academic voices, it sounds like 25 people have written your assignment, and it's actually quite obvious that you have copied and pasted information from different sources to create like a single made up one. So in 2002, 𝐷𝐬 decided to do a study to ask students why do they plagiarize. 59% of students said that it was to get a better grade. 54% said it was because they were lazy and had bad time management. 40% said it was because it was the easy access to material on the internet. It's just so easy to get the information. 29% said that it was because they did not understand the rules of plagiarism and of referencing. And then another 29% said it's because it happens unconsciously. So today we're looking at how to understand the rules of referencing so that you don't end up being the person who's in trouble because you didn't understand or because it happened unconsciously. So you have to be aware of what you're doing. Yeah, we have some of the consequences of plagiarism. So you'll see that universities take quite severe measures against plagiarism. At some universities, you won't be allowed to return or reapply to the university for 5 years, so you'll be expelled and suspended. And it is actually taken seriously. You'll see that universities are taking this seriously. Okay, so then the principles of referencing, the most basic principle of referencing is that it's somebody else's intellectual property. That is absolutely important to remember. Someone else put in the effort, put in the time, it's their intellectual property. You wouldn't go to their house and steal something from them. Why would you steal their information? Then it's the principle of access. So we want people to have access to different sources of information. The principle of the economy, so you can't be benefiting from someone else's work. And you might think, oh, but no one's going to pay me for my assignment, but you are going to end up getting a degree or a mark for that assignment. So that means that you are benefiting in some way. Referencing also helps us have more of a standardized set of sources, right? So if everybody uses the same referencing style and the same principles of referencing, it means that we can easily understand the referencing used in another source. And then it's also transparency. You're showing people that you're transparent about where your information comes from, where your ideas come from, and what you have done. Transparency is very important in your work. Okay, so the golden rule of referencing is that you should always give the reader enough information to help them easily and quickly find the source that you have cited. If they wanted to look at your source and check it for themselves, they should easily be able to do this. And this is where those DOI numbers or the DOI website, we'll talk about that just now, how important that information is, how important it is to give enough information. So you can't just give me the person's surname and the date, because maybe they wrote 10 articles in that year. They were published multiple times. So I need a lot of information so that it's easy to go and find that information again. Okay, so how do we avoid plagiarism? The first way is to always summarize and restate another person's work. So it's, and give acknowledgement to them. Just because you're paraphrasing, just because you're rewriting it, doesn't mean that it's now your work. You still have to give that person the acknowledgement that they deserve. And then if you're using direct quotations, remember your quotation marks. And again, giving enough information. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the APA referencing guidelines. This is APA 7. A lot of people are still using APA 6. You'll have to find out from your own institution which one you should be using. There aren't too many drastic changes between the two in any way, so you shouldn't have too much trouble using the one and not the other, either way. Make sure that you are using the correct version of it for your institution. Okay, so this is the level of headings. So if you're starting off, your first heading. So let's say this is our methodology chapter. Our first methodology would be there. And then we begin our little introduction over there. The next one might be research design. There, it will go there. Underneath research design, we might have participants and then sampling techniques. Okay, so we'll have different levels. So as one thing falls under the, as we move down the levels, the way that it is supposed to be written changes. Most students actually completely forget that there are different ways of using APA for your headings, for your for any graphs that you put in, for any tables that you put in. It's actually, there's a lot of information. Most students only focus on just the referencing. Okay, so in your in APA, we also have a certain order in which we put our information. So we'll have our title page and an abstract. An abstract is not required for all students, though some universities and some institutions do want you to write an abstract as well. So this will be your first page, and then the abstract will be on your second page, and your actual work will begin on the third page if you have an abstract, or on the second page if you don't have an abstract. So then you'll do all of your writing. Then you'll have your references, you'll have your footnotes if there were any, and then you'll have your tables and your figures and any appendices that need to be attached to your work. Okay, so now our in-text citation. If you have one author and you're putting it at the end of the sentence, you'll say the surname and the date. If it's in your narrative, so part of your sentence, it's the name and then the date is in brackets. If you have two authors, you'll use the ampersand and then the date. And if you're writing it in your narrative, you'll use the word and the date will be in brackets. This is for 3 or more authors. In APA 6, 3 or more authors still need to be written out the first time you use them, and then you use et al. In APA 7, from 3 or more authors, you'll be using et al. So you'll say the first person's surname, et al, and the date. The surname, et al, and the date in brackets. So this is the first difference between 6 and 7. If you have a group author and they do have an abbreviation, then your first citation will have the whole name written out, like the National Institute of Mental Health, and then in square brackets, you'll put in their abbreviation and then the date. If you're putting it into your narrative then, you'll have National Institute of Mental Health, and you'll put in brackets, you'll put the abbreviation and the date. From the second time you use them, then you'll only be using the abbreviations. And then if you have a group author without an abbreviation, you just write out the name. Please don't make up abbreviations for things that don't have abbreviations. That's a little bit ridiculous. Then for multiple works by the same authors, or for multiple, so if it's multiple works by the same authors, then you will put in the author's name, and you'll put them in alphabetical order or in date order. So if it's the same person has published more than once and you want to say that they've said this more than once, you can put their name in. So if we use an example, it could be Luna, and it can be Luna 2019, semicolon, Luna, comma, 2020, and then that could be the same author. You put them in chronological order. If you want to say that multiple authors have said the same thing, then you'll do the same thing, but within your brackets, you place the different authors in alphabetical order. Okay, when you use quotes for short quotes, those are quotes with less than 40 words, you place the quotation marks around the sentence and you add the page number. For longer quotes, we place them in a block format. And this is an example of what a block format looks like. So if this is your regular sentence, it will be indented, and then you'll have your quotes, and then you'll have your reference at the end of it. If you're using the narrative, you can put the quote on top here, but the page number will still be at the end. Okay, so when it comes to references in your reference list, right? There are some things that have to be in there. We have to have the author, the date, the title, and the source of the information. Where can other people go and find this information? Okay, so if we look at an example of how to do the journal article, we'll see here that you write out the names of the authors. As they appear on the journal article, do not put them in alphabetical order because you think so. There's a reason their names are in a certain order on the work. So you'll put in all of their names. You don't use the word and, you use the ampersand sign, the date. You'll put in the title, the journal. This would be your version, your issue and volume number, and your page numbers. Then here is the difference again between APA 6 and 7. In APA 6, you're still going to write DOI, and you're going to put in a DOI number, or it will start by doi.org. In APA 7, you simply put in the actual address, the actual website. For a book, it's the same thing. We have the author, the date, the title, published by, and where you can retrieve the information. Again, this is different. This last section differs between APA 6 and APA 7. If you're using a report, so let's say it's a report from the World Health Organization, you put them in, you use the date, the title, and then again, where can I go and get this? It should be so simple that I can just click on the link and find the information that you have sourced, which is great actually. Okay, so if you're using a website or a web page, you'll do the same thing. You'll put in the name of it, of whoever's, wherever you're getting it. So if it's published by the National Institute of Mental Health, if it's their website, that's the one you put in there. The date, you can put in the last time it was updated, so the month that it was published or updated. The title, who is publishing this? The US Department of Health and Human, okay, whatever, National Institute of Health. And then you put in the where we can find it. Remember, again, this would look different in APA 6. This is the APA 7 version of it. Okay, then I've added a link to the end of the slides that will be made available to you guys again. If you click on this link, it actually takes you to a copy of the APA 6th edition. And you can go and look up the difference, what is different between the two there. Or if you're still using 6th edition for this year or for this semester or for this term, then you can find all of it here. Okay, guys, do you have any questions? The thing about using referencing is that you should follow it like a recipe. So consider this is something you've never made before and someone hands you a recipe and they say, go and do it. You're going to follow each of the steps. And that's exactly how you should treat the APA referencing guide. You should treat it as a recipe of how to place your information so that it is written according to those rules. So keep the guide nearby. Download a copy of it. I know you can buy a hard copy of the 7th edition as well. Okay, and then so use it, make sure, use it as a recipe, follow it. And if you just follow it, because nobody's expecting you to know all of these little details out of your head. Nobody's expecting you to know how you should write the first heading and then the second heading. These are not things that anybody knows. Maybe editors know this because they do this every day. What we do is we just go and make sure that we are doing it correctly. If you're using reference management tools like Mendeley or the one on Word or whatever, the thing is that you always have to double check because it's just the software and it can go wrong. So it's important to always make sure that you check that it has gone wrong. Okay, so on word limits, how far can you go over? Usually 10%. So if your paper is 2,000 words, you can write 2,200 and then you've written too much. Learning to write concisely, that means within a certain, saying something very clearly using less words, is a skill that you need to develop. And if you look at articles specifically, published articles are written very concisely. Those are examples of things that don't give you excess information. Try and stick with that and try and teach yourself to write very concisely. If you've written a very long sentence, stop and look at it and look at how you might be able to rephrase it or rewrite it so that it's shorter. I see how you say that you're struggling with citing quotations. Okay, so if you're citing quotations, again, if it's less than 40 words, you put in the quotation marks, you put in the name, the year, so the name, the date, and the page number for quotations. If you're using a longer quotation, you put it in, so more than 40 words, it goes into the, sorry, I'm reading the question and trying to answer the question. It goes into a block and then you cite again the name and the information. Okay, so I'm seeing that a lot of you are saying that you're struggling with information that has been cited in another source, right? Okay, so I can open up the APA 6th edition one for you and show you what it looks like there. I think it makes more sense to show you rather than to try and explain it to you. Okay, so this is the 6th edition link that I've attached. You can look here what you're looking for, so you can see that they do give a lot of detail, and eventually there will be a 7th edition one that gives the same amount of detail. Okay, so you want to say when you have a secondary source. So one work by one author when the author is cited more than once in a paragraph. Okay, no. Citing a secondary source. Here is the example of that. So where possible, always go back to the original material. This is what I said earlier, as well as of the quality of your material. Go and try and find that original material. I do know that that's not always possible though. So this is how you would cite a secondary source. So you'll say that, let's just see, does it say? Okay. Acknowledge the source you have read, showing it is a secondary source, okay? You have not read the original source, but read it in a secondary source. Within the text, we use the word as cited in to indicate this is a secondary source. Okay. So Fawcett, as cited in Pollitt and Beck. So the date isn't added for Fawcett. The date is added for Pollitt and Beck because that is what you've actually read. So Fawcett, as cited in Pollitt and Beck, 2008, that is how you would do that. And then in the reference list, you'll cite Pollitt and Beck because that is the work that you are actually referencing.
Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, we'll take another question from Mbali. Can you add http:// if the source only has the DOI? This is for APA 7th.
Can you add
the HTTP if the source only has the DOI?
Yes.
Okay, and this relates to APA 7th as well?
In APA 7 that you would do that, yes.
Okay, great. And then Charlotte sends a question. Under what circumstances are referencing editions reviewed?
I actually have no idea why they review them. Jane, do you have any idea?
To complicate our lives and to keep us on our toes. I think that's...
I guess that is it, yes.
I think that's it. Okay, the next question is from Rudolph. Are there standard metrics for paragraph indentations in APA?
I'm sure there are, yes. I'm sure there are. Let's see if it's in this. This is a short guide. This is just a short guide. So it doesn't give all of the information. But if you go and look at the full guide will give you everything on how to do your tables, your graphs, how to number different paragraphs, the indentations, everything is covered in the full. It's just like a substantial amount of things to work through. So this is just a short student-friendly version of this.
Thank you, V. Eve asks, is there anything like too much citing?
I know some lecturers will tell you that you have oversighted. For me, I'd rather have you cite more than is necessary than get in trouble for plagiarizing because you didn't provide enough references. So for me, the guideline is after every idea that you've taken from someone else, you cite them. So once in every idea. So it doesn't have to be every sentence because you might be describing a whole idea. Finish describing your idea and then put in the reference.
Thank you. Okay.
So the slides will be made available. Jen, how will we be making the slides available?
If you can email the slides to me, Vanessa, and then anyone who wants the slides, I'm going to put my email address in this chat, and I'll also put it on our social media. I'll edit the posters for today's webinar and I'll put it in the social media. So you can send me an email here.
And if you do if you then receive the slides, you can just click on the link, but you can also look this up. This should be one of the first things that come up when you type in APA 6th edition. And you can also look up the 7th edition changes. And there is also different websites that help you get on top of the 7th edition differences and changes and things as well.
Are there any other questions?
Nobody has to know this off by heart ever. If you're not an editor and this doesn't influence your job in some way, what is important is that you can go and look at what you're supposed to do and do it correctly. That is it.
It's very scary though. Citing and referencing can be quite scary, especially when you've written a long paper or you've done an extensive amount of research. Yes. It can get a little bit confusing. I still get a bit nervous when I cite and reference, but I think also go through a list systematically of points of who you've cited and who you've referenced. So every single time you read something, I'm going to use that in an essay, write it down so that you remember where you've got this in. Exactly, because after let's say even a 5-page assignment, it gets lost. And I mean, I think also it is important to, between essays, I personally believe, to give yourself a week's break, if you can, between an assignment and between an assignment submission, because it's so easy to make an error when you're citing, to miss an open bracket, to not place a comma, and you might actually get marked down on that depending on the marker. So yeah. Thank you, V.
Taking a step back is always a good idea. Just take that break and then come back to the work.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone? No? Has everyone got my email address? I've put it in the chat. If you haven't seen my email address, you can raise your hand. Okay.
If you have a question, you can unmute yourself and just ask your question. Okay, guys. The important thing is just to follow the rules. It's not fun. It's not going to be the most exciting part. You're going to write your assignment and you might be enjoying your assignment so much, and then you get to the very boring part, which is doing the citing properly. But it's only fair. You wouldn't want someone to steal your work.
Hi, V.
Hi.
I want to ask a question. I have a question here. Let's say you are referencing for a 7th edition APA.
Yes.
And the source only has DOI. Can you put HTTP?
Yes, you can add that in, yes. But that would only be for 7th edition, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
You're speaking to Nomfundo. I just wanted to know that since you mentioned that it is not a problem to cite too much, but it depends on the lecturer.
Yes.
So when it comes to a reflective essay or a piece of work that you need to write, yes, your introduction and whatsoever you have cited, but when it comes to a point where now you have to reflect on what happened, or to someone, probably you encountered a nonverbal, so you're talking about that, and you need to speak from your point of view. So do you need to cite that, or you just leave it as it is, as you've written it, because it's your point of view? And
if
probably,
it's your point of view, then you don't reference it. If it's your own point of view, if you want to back up your own point of view with research from other sources, then you will reference them. So if you want to, you can explain your own experience, but you can also say that this is a similar experience with someone else or something like that. So you can back up your information, but if it's just your own work, then no, you don't reference your own work.
all right, thank you.